Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. I think today we have a really interesting panel and a group of inspiring women that I'm sure all of you are looking forward to hear from. So I'll probably just quickly introduce themselves. And so we have Jen from CDC, who is basically the director of value creation and the co-chair of the 2X Collaborative. Hi, Jen. We have Jessica, who is the Vice President, Investments, Private Equity, and Venture Capital from DEG, as well as the co chair of the 2X Challenge. We have Ayaka, who is the Director, Gender Investment and Innovation from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. And there's me. I'll be the moderator today for your session, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion. If I can request the panelists to maybe speak a few lines about themselves so that the audience can get to know you better. We'll start with you, Jen.
Great. Thanks very much, Jungnu. Jen Braswell. I lead value creation at CDC, which is a function that we established about 4 years ago to give ourselves resources and space to understand how we can invest specifically to advance certain themes. And gender equality was one of the key themes that we've prioritized. So part of my journey personally over the last few years has been establishing the 2X Challenge, and more recently leading as co-chair with Jessica, the new industry body, the 2X Collaborative, which is intended to help bring the full spectrum of capital allocators into this space of gender lens investing. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks. Great. Jessica, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm Jessica Espinoza. I'm Vice President for Private Equity and Venture Capital Investments at DG. So my team invests in PE and VC funds and also does co-investments and direct investments, mostly into tech-enabled business models. So I'm very pleased to be here. As Jen mentioned, we are co-chairing the 2X Collaborative.
I think, Jessica, we're facing some trouble probably with your audio. Maybe while we wait for Jessica to tune in, Ayaka, could you share a little bit about yourself and about Sasakawa?
Hi, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Ayaka Matsuno. I'm the Director of Gender Investment and Innovation Department of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. For those people who don't know about Sasakawa Peace Foundation, we are the private foundation based in Tokyo, Japan, and then we advance international cooperation, exchange, and understanding to try to make our world more harmonious and inclusive, and then equitable, inclusive world. And then our department, my department, Gender Investment and Innovation Department, we host Asia Women Impact Fund, which is a $100 million initiative. We use our part of endowment to really foster gender lens in investing in the region and try to help women and women entrepreneurs to really unleash their potential. So I'm very happy to join you and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Eka. Jessica, are you back?
Yes, hi,
Hey,
I'm back. I
hi.
hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
Great.
I'm not sure how much you missed, but basically mentioned that I'm investing in PE and VC at DG, the German Development Finance Institution. And as Jen mentioned, together we are co-chairing the 2X Collaborative as a global industry body for gender lens investing. And I've also been chairing the 2X Challenge for the last year. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Thanks so much. Jessica, while you're here, and maybe, let's get right into it. The 2X challenge has been something which has been talked about so much, and I think it is setting industry standards overall as well. We see in terms of the quantum that you've raised, this collectively commitment of over 7 billion, I think last year between 18 and 20, and another 3 billion from private investors. So, how do you see this 2X challenge, in terms of going forward? If you look at 2022, And maybe if you can talk a little bit about what's been the sort of average commitment that's coming both from DFIs as well as private investors. I think that's something that we would be interested in.
So I think it's very important to remember how the 2X Challenge started. It started as a joint commitment by the development finance institutions, initially of the G7 countries, at the G7 summit in 2018, where we said we recognize that there's such an important impact case and business case for gender lens investing, for investing, as we called it back then, into women's empowerment. So we challenge ourselves to look at our core business and to mainstream a gender lens across everything we do. And so we said we collectively commit to invest and mobilize at least 3 billion over 3 years until the end of 2020. At the time, there wasn't any industry standard yet for gender lens investing. And so we jointly developed the 2X criteria, which look at different areas along the value chain. So women's entrepreneurship, women's leadership, quality employment, and products and services that meaningfully enhance the lives of women. And those criteria have quickly become a global industry standard for gender lens investing that today many industry players are using well beyond the members of the 2X Challenge or the 2X Collaborative. This 3 billion target was then significantly surpassed, as you just mentioned. So we've really seen a lot of traction and a lot of great pipeline. And so by the end of 2020, the DFIs themselves had actually invested almost 7 billion of their own capital. And when also counting mobilizations or co-investments from the private and public sector, we're standing at 11.4 billion. Now, it's also important to remember that this is not a separate fund. So what we did was really to look at the DFI business model and to see how we can meaningfully apply the 2X criteria and embed a gender lens into everything we do. If you look at other players in the market who are working with the criteria, they may have quite a different investment approach, and yet they have also been able to meaningfully integrate or embed gender into their work by using the criteria. As for your question about the average ticket size or the average commitment, the average, what we've seen is not necessarily a meaningful indicator because when we look at the portfolio of 2X that we as DFIs have built up, we see very small tickets, like, for example, just 2 million that DG invested directly into a fintech, which is an equity investment and at a very early stage. But we also see quite large volumes, for example, of a joint commitment of a few hundred million, which we collectively invested into a big private equity fund. So it's hard to say or to speak about averages because our investments are quite diverse in this pool of 2X aligned investments.
No, absolutely. And I think as ADB ourselves, we have been trying to mainstream gender into all of our investments and remain committed to it. But just taking that forward, if we've already raised so much of capital and going forward, I think we have an even larger target. We're now looking at 15 billion for 2022. So are you looking of most of this money coming in from institutional LPs as well?
So we're hoping that we as DFIs can commit or invest a large share of these 15 billion and then ideally surpass it again by bringing in private sector investors or fully commercial investors. We have, as I mentioned earlier, just launched a 2X Collaborative as a global industry body for gender lens investing because we've seen so much traction in the global space. So we've seen pension funds that are now eager to come on board and join the 2X initiative, family offices, foundations, insurance companies, other commercial banks, and also the funds directly. So we see a lot of interest and really this opportunity to bring the full spectrum of capital providers together and to shift capital together by co-investing, sharing pipeline. That's the purpose of the 2X Collaborative. So we do hope to see a lot more also fully commercial and mainstream capital coming into the market and towards gender lens investing. You also ask about the future vision. I think something that we are very keen to see, and we can dive into that in a moment, is to look at new types of investments. So, for example, we're very active in pursuing investment opportunities at the gender and climate nexus, We're also just spearheading a new initiative together with Gender Smart on care economy and investments. So kind of driving innovation in the care economy space to see what meaningful role the private sector and investments can play there. And then maybe that's something for Jen to talk more about. I'd love also to share what we're doing on 2X flagship funds and on our latest initiative, 2X Ignite, to really shift capital towards women fund managers who are investing with a gender lens, because I think that is currently a big gap in the market to really also back women-led fund managers.
No, absolutely. And I think we've heard about that in a previous panel as well. And Jen, would be great to have your views, especially around 2X Ignite and otherwise as well as CDC. How do you view this?
Great, thank you. Yes, as Jessica said, there's a couple of priority areas that we've developed as we've been thinking about shaping the 2X initiative. One is encouraging origination and encouraging, movement of capital into the places where it is moving less rapidly at the moment or traditionally, and that is into the hands of women entrepreneurs. It's into the hands of businesses that are targeting new consumer segments, specifically supporting women's needs. But the other area is nudging change in business as usual. And so the 2X framework and what we're doing at CDC is really targeting both. So it's taking a very innovative approach and trying to get into these segments of the economy where we haven't been able to invest already for a variety of reasons. And I'll talk about that in a second. And so looking to originate differently. And then also to look at the portfolio as we see it, the business opportunities and the investment opportunities as they come in pipeline, and working with those management teams to make changes in their business, to ensure that there is greater access to leadership positions for women, to make sure that they are recruiting and placing board positions by looking at different networks and finding different professionals, and then to ensure that they are tailoring and designing board products and services to serve women particularly. So we've got these two tracks. And one of the areas in the first track where we've been looking to try to originate differently and to be able to move capital in spaces where it hasn't gone before is we have seen over the last 18 months, 2 years, that there's a huge number of newly formed funds coming to market led by women and with a gender lens strategy, because they themselves are seeing this business opportunity. They're seeing this huge unmet need by women consumers, and they're looking to invest in that space, in startups and in non-traditional businesses who typically haven't sought equity capital. There is a really interesting opportunity here. We at CDC have seen 70 or so of these fund managers coming into our pipeline. However, they are coming, and I heard the discussion from the previous panel, they're coming looking and smelling different from traditional PE and VC fund managers. They are first time typically, or perceived as first time teams, because they're coming together for the first time. They may have a huge amount of experience individually, but they're a first time team, and they don't have track records. So they don't already have a fund in their under wing. And so what we are looking to do collectively across the 2X community, and I think this is a bit of the power of what 2X is, which is we've been able to use COVID, use the time period we've had where we've all been sort of captive at home, to co-create a facility, a blended capital facility that will provide a catalytic bridge for those fund managers who are coming to market with these perceived structural barriers, and providing bridge capital in terms of warehouse capital to start investing in portfolio, and working capital to keep the lights on while fundraising, to move these fund managers to first close faster. And that is the 2X Ignite facility, which we are capitalizing now. It will be focused on the global South, so 5 regions, $200 million facility, and we're looking to bring it to life in 2022. So a big exciting new project.
Great. I'll come back to you in a minute on that, but maybe Ayaka, we'll turn to Sasakawa and just hear about what your approach to gender investing is.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of 2X Challenge, we are also supporting 2X Challenge. Actually, 2 years ago. So it was one of my first conferences abroad after I joined Sasakawa Peace Foundation 2019. One of the representative from OPIC, now DFI, the U.S. The Development Finance Institution, they said that you have to really push Japanese government because they are the only one who hasn't really met the target and the 2x challenge. And I was like, oh, okay. I took it to my heart. And then since we have this instrument, Asia Women Impact Fund, and we are really trying to be that flag holder to really push and promote genderless investing in Asia. So we said, okay, we have to really support. And of course, Japanese government is doing everything, and JICA has really done great work in terms of mobilizing resources. But one of the things that, they created, JICA and JBIC, they came up with a fund called Japan ASEAN Women Empowerment Fund, JWEF. So we joined as an investor to support the initiative. We put $30 million into that. And then also not only just investing directly, we also try to really create the environment where genderless investing will be cherished in Asia. So we constantly working with ecosystem and working together with different stakeholders, because at the end of the day, DFI has to mobilize resources from private sectors, and then we are in the middle, not fully institutional investors, but then we are not public sector either. So we are in between, and we try to mobilize. So that's what we are doing from here. Jagnu? Oh, maybe we lost her.
I think we have. Jessica, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about how we've been thinking about taking the 2X challenge and moving it to the next level with the 2X collaborative and what the 2X collaborative can provide.
Absolutely. So the 2X Collaborative is a global industry body for genderless investing. We launched it earlier this year at the UN Generation Equality Forum as a joint initiative, or as a joint commitment, I should say, at the GEF, together with Gender Smart and the ILN, the Investor Leadership Network of Global Pension Funds with over $5 trillion assets under management. And so the 2X Collaborative is starting operations on the 1st of January. We have, since we launched it, we have now, I think, over 30 new members who've come on board. So we have the DFIs, we have the pension funds, we have commercial, private bank. Back to Jen's point about really bringing this into the mainstream and making this business as usual. But we also have very interesting members who have a gender-first investing strategy, so quite a diverse spectrum. And the industry body will build investor capacity, so to really accompany each other on this journey of making practical change happen and really looking at the entire investment cycle and embedding the gender lens in everything we do. We also have an innovation lab where we co-create new solutions such as 2X Ignite, something that we're particularly excited about. And then we have shared tools and resources and training, so really coming together in a smart way. And together with Gender Smart, the 2X Collaborative will be a one-stop shop for genderless investing. So we invite everybody who's a capital provider to join us as a member, and everyone else to stay engaged and collaborate with us.
Great.
Welcome
Thanks,
back,
Jessica.
Jagnu.
Yes, sorry. Tech issues. I don't know what happened. But I think maybe coming to a little more difficult question, and sorry if I'm putting anyone in a spot, but do you really see that, if you look at the quantum of capital which is flowing into something that we traditionally call genderless investing, but how much of it is actually trickling down to where the need is? So in another word, do you really see pinkwashing happening? And what's been your experience with that? Maybe Jen, if you would like to take that first.
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, I think that there is a risk of so-called pink washing, which is, a whole bunch of investors and institutions jumping on the bandwagon because they see capital flowing in this space, or they see the opportunity, and sort of slapping on yes, we have a gender strategy, but really not with the right level of intentionality. And so I think we're seeing that. So we're seeing with the sort of 2X label, if you will, which has only been so far available for this small kind of club of DFIs to be able to kind of place onto an enterprise. We've been seeing that there has been quite a wave of interest in sort of being recognized as 2X. So where we'll be moving in the next phase is to be developing an assurance certification mechanism that will be independently established in the market to allow for any enterprise to have a meaningful review and to create an industry recognized mechanism to guard against pinkwashing. I mean, I think there's a couple of elements here. One is, in this world of trying to move the tanker of the financial services industry from being completely gender blind to taking consideration of women as a kind of a strategic factor of consideration into decision making, there's a process that needs to happen. And so I don't think it's fair necessarily to sort of label negatively an institution that is on the journey, because our own institutions, CDC and DEG and all of the 2X members, have been on this journey, and it is a bit slow, but it's progress. And so I think we want to be very mindful of not creating products that are falsely advertised. So creating gender lens products that are actually not reaching women, that is where we don't want to be building this industry. But allowing for the time that it takes to develop the institutional processes to begin to mainstream and adopt a gender lens without being overly negative, I think is needed as well. So we have to strike the right balance. But I do think that we need to be vigilant as an investment community to ensure that we are all putting real intentionality and real meaning behind what we call gender lens investing, so that and I think the way that we get there, and this maybe is another point to talk about next on the panel, is through ensuring we've got the data that we need to be able to actually show outcomes. I mean, that is a missing link right now, and something that needs quite a bit of work in the ecosystem.
No, absolutely. I think overall, if you see, it's the sort of intentionality that matters. End of the day, and we have to be taking incremental steps if we have to really achieve the outcomes that we are after. Jessica, would you like to add to that in terms of what's been your experience?
Yeah. Oh, am I frozen? Can you still see me?
No, I can still see you. Yes.
Okay, great. I look frozen here, but I'm glad you can still see and hear me. So yeah, no, I would totally add to what Jen just mentioned. I think this intentionality is really important. I also think if I look at what has really worked in my DG investments, it's combining the funding with this intentionality aspect. So for example, we have developed an advisory product called the Gender Smart Opportunities Assessment. And we've seen that if we couple our capital with that assessment, which is very data driven, that really helps to promote change within financial institutions, for example, that we invest in, because they now see exactly the market opportunity, the benchmarking, and they have a data-driven way of moving the needle and really making sure that the funding goes where it's supposed to go, to women entrepreneurs and gender smart businesses. And then obviously the greatest impact can be where, I'm also on the board, or one of my colleagues is on the board, or DG nominates a female board director, so that we can then also really take influence and accompany the strategy and change over time. So I think having sex disaggregated data is the prerequisite to be really intentional and to measure your impact, to steer into this direction. And so I think, definitely, I mean, data-driven solutions, just as in any other area, are really important to move the needle on gender lens investing.
So DG has been investing, I think, for a while, applying the 2X criteria into PEVC. So what's really been your finding or learning from the data that you've gathered when you've been investing into some of these businesses?
So interestingly, we've just done a study together with ÖIB, the Austrian Development Bank, on really digging into the portfolio data of our entire portfolios, and then also developing more nuanced theories of change. And a new insight that we knew kind of from the academic literature, but that we now also saw in our own data set, is that when you have women in leadership, that really has ripple effects. So that creates gender responsive and gender forward policies and practices within the institution. It creates role models. It creates, especially when women are in investment positions, which is, by the way, something that is very important. I think sometimes we just talk about women in leadership, not necessarily in the types of positions where they are. So when women are in investment decision-making roles, we really see that more capital is flowing towards women-led businesses. And that is something that with 2X, as Jen mentioned, we have been able to really mainstream this across our portfolio and our way of doing business. And also now having the data basis to know what's our baseline, where do we want to go over the years. At the same time, I still see these systemic, kind of barriers that are very hard to tackle for an individual institution, especially a regulated financial entity. And those are, these perceived risk of, for example, backing first-time fund managers or more innovative business models, which are perceived as untested. And so I think there, a facility like 2X Ignite or other mechanisms of catalytic capital and blended finance can really play a role to create the evidence base and actually show that this is a strategy that you should also back commercially, and that these risks are more perceived risk than anything else.
Absolutely. Ayaka, I think SPF has also made direct investments as well as indirect investments into women founded businesses. So, what has been your experience in terms of your learnings from these investments, and generally, what sort of criteria do you apply when any startup founder approaches you for a grant or for capital?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, follow on everybody's intentionalities talk, but intentionality is very, very important. And we don't actually do direct investment. We do invest into funds, so fund managers. So they have to really have a very clear intentionality to support women's empowerment and then gender equality. And then that needs to be integrated from the advertisement to sourcing and due diligence and all the way to monitoring and evaluation. So we expect those fund managers to be fully aware of IMM, in impact management and measurement requirements that we have, and then fully intentional and show that we could actually bring in positive impact on women that we try to support. So that's what we have been doing. Another point that you raised, it's very important about data-driven solution. We definitely are very much into data and then research-oriented organizations, and then all of that efforts to create the research and then data is really to present or to co-create and something that is very much needed at the ground, and then feasible, and also really sustainable in terms of solution. We don't want to just give grant one time and then that grant would be disappeared, or just one time and a good effect but it doesn't last long. So we would like to really work together and then leverage the local partners and then their experience to really identify the need-based solution. So therefore, we need to have the data. So that's what we have been doing. One example that we have done last year, we invested in JAWEF, the one fund that we have talked about, Japan ASEAN Women Empowerment Fund. This is a microfinance fund. But then, so actually the chain of investment is pretty far away from us to the fund manager to the microfinance institution, and an institution to the end users. But as us, very responsible investor, we would like to see what kind of impact that we could really see at the end and beneficiary level. So we did that research using the lean data approach, and did the telephone survey of around 400 end users of two microfinance institutions in Myanmar, and try to really find out, what exactly the loans that we provide being used, and then how impactful for those women's daily life as well as their enterprise. So yeah, definitely data is very important, and we continue to really look into that data-driven solutions.
Just to segue into that, when you're looking at data, and especially given over the last 2 years, all of us have been really, it's been a difficult couple of years given COVID. Have you had a chance to look at how this has, in terms of the data that you would have captured, and an open question to all three of you? Have you really seen what's the impact on women here? We keep hearing the anecdotal evidence. There's something that we see even in our own portfolio, that women have been to a large extent disproportionately impacted by COVID. But would like to hear from you as well, what sort of data you've seen on the ground. Anyone would like? Jen, Jessica?
I mean, I think it's clear that women's lives particularly have been impacted by COVID. I mean, we can look at our own lives, probably all of us, and think about the added levels of responsibility, domestic caring, the things that typically lands disproportionately on women. I think that there has been also a very interesting realization by men who have been in close quarters over the past 2 years with those responsibilities, that there's a realization that there actually is a lot of work involved in the so-called invisible sort of economy. And I think that's why we are seeing, as Jessica mentioned earlier, some real interest in investment in care economy businesses, enterprises, and trying to understand what business models will make this type of service work in a private sector framework. That said, in our portfolio, we did quite a bit at CDC to provide and inject sort of resilience capital into the portfolio in terms of short-term relief, short-term technical assistance, bringing in advisory support. We found that the portfolio was very resilient, and again, anecdotally, we found that the businesses that had greater proportion of women in leadership were the most resilient. So we saw a lot of innovation in pivoting business models and in pivoting to new consumer sectors, or to looking at where the business could be of most service, and particularly in that darker period of crisis in 2020. And so I think there are stories that we can learn from, and they're just sort of being analyzed now. So I'm looking forward to building on what we've seen, and also to building on this opening and realization around what is missing in terms of where capital can support women's empowerment more actively. And I think that is, part of that solution is in investing in the care economy and in developing care economy business models that can help to alleviate that added burden that women have been carrying for hundreds of years.
Absolutely. Ayaka, if we look at some of our key learnings from COVID, has that altered your approach in terms of investing, or from SPF point of view? Do you look at it differently pre-COVID, post-COVID, or do you think this is something which has a much longer term sort of impact and shouldn't be looked at in terms of a narrow lens of a year or so?
Yeah, thank you. Essentially, we haven't really changed our strategy. We always put women and women entrepreneurs at the center of our programming. So, and then we want to see the long-lasting solution. So, we didn't really, change our strategy. But then we see increasingly the digitalization, or utilizing of technology, and embracing digital technology into their businesses. Because of COVID, and also in our case, we have operation in Myanmar. So because of the political situation, it was, kind of forced to accelerate it that direction. But whether COVID or coup happened or not, still that the direction towards, embracing digital technology was already there and then increasing. And then there is a digital divide and then gap that women are still less accessing those opportunities. So we would like to really intensify our efforts that, women wouldn't be left behind. We women also can really, embrace the great potential that the technology can bring. That's a really good segue to this conference, right? But then we
Yes,
believe
yes.
so. We believe so. And that's what we have been seeing in all the entrepreneurs that we have been interacted with.
No, absolutely. And I think within ADB also, I think there's a very strong push to make sure that how do we encourage more women to get into traditional, so to speak, male dominated sectors or subsectors, whether you're looking at investing, whether you're looking at technology. And we see there's a substantial increase there, and that's something that we're increasingly seeing. So, given the focus going forward is so much on technology, on I think digital bridging the divide to a large extent, I think this is a very important aspect to look into. Jessica, would you like to share something on what sort of sectors you see going forward, which are going to largely benefit from the 2x challenge, or from investing into gender lens investing as a whole?
So I think overall in the development finance space, we see a big push when it comes to the tech sector, but quite broadly. So tech-enabled business models, global business models, and digitally enabled businesses. I think that is a major trend, and it's interesting because we know on the one hand from the data that we see, kind of globally, that there is a big digital gender divide which we have to bridge. At the same time, we've been talking to some of our fund managers, and especially I'm thinking of one particular female fund manager who has also shared that she really sees this trend as an equalizer, because she mentions that these new tech companies that are emerging are often women founded, women led, and even the ones that are founded by men kind of take pay equity for granted. They see diversity and inclusion as just, the way things should be, like the new normal. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities in that space. Something I've also seen, and that's more like in Southern Africa, is that in markets where there was previously no VC fund that had female partners, there weren't any women-led tech businesses visible. But after the first VC fund, which with 2 Black women in leadership was launched, all of a sudden there were female founders in the tech space. So I think we should really not underestimate the signaling effect, and making role models visible, but also making sure that VC investors who invest in early stage tech businesses are relatable to the entrepreneurs. So I think we really need more diversity in the fund management space.
Absolutely, and I think that's really something that we all need to be cognizant of. I think we're running short of time, but just in terms of closing remarks, I think what we really need to focus on is how do we really mainstream this and institutionalize this, and would be if you could share your last probably 2 lines on what you think is important to make sure that GLI becomes actually mainstream and it's adopted universally.
Yep, I can kick off with my final thoughts, which are that the only way to move this agenda forward quickly is to do this together. And that is sort of the spirit of the 2X initiative, the 2X collaborative. We've been talking about it as if it's a thing unto itself, but what it is really is a collaboration and a bringing together of the full ecosystem into one track, so that we are using the resources, the scarce resources that we have, to move this agenda forward further. And that is about building a standard. It's about building the systems to create the certification, and it's about moving the needle. And I think the only way we can do that is to do it in a unified way. So I'm very much looking forward to the next phase.
Thank you, Jen.
Happy to add to that. And I think it's also really important that we break out of these SDG boxes, or like these silos of looking at gender separately, and then there's a separate climate debate, and then somebody else looks at another SDG, because SDG 5 gender equality is the prerequisite and the catalyst for all other SDGs. And I think it's so important that we mainstream gender in all climate finance, not only in a subset of climate finance, and really look at it holistically. Like gender lens investing, there are strategies that are gender first, which only focus on gender equality, which is really important, but it's equally important to bring in the gender lens into all other types, whether it's infrastructure finance or climate finance, in really all types of products and asset classes.
I fully agree with both of Jen and Jessica's point. I just wanted to add one more thing. We need to really build that the business case that investing in women is not just right things, but the smart things to do. And that's what we have been repeatedly saying, that we need to have evidence. So we need to build the business cases. So from our investment fund, we would like to really achieve the both financial return as well as social impact. So that's what we would like to really build on.
Great. On that positive note, I think we are at the end of the session. We could have continued for much longer, I'm sure. But thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists and the audience for joining us. I hope you've taken a fresh perspective to how we could really take or get on this journey together. Thank you.